may be seated. So I did a lot of prayer over the last several weeks, but more intently this last week, on where to go in this new situation we're living in. And God brought me right back to where we left off. He brought me right back to John 7. And he gave me this idea, this thought, not that he verbally spoke to me, but he spoke to my heart as I was praying about this, and he said, when I gave you this passage of John to start, I knew what the world was going to be in the future. So he was telling me, it's not time to change it. I gave you the book of John and said, I want you to preach and talk through the book of John, knowing what was coming. And so that gave me some peace, that gave me some settlement in knowing that God, for now, wants us to continue on through the book of John. He wants us to pave through. He wants us to see what John had to write down in 80, 90. Why did he add this fourth gospel on when the other three were already done? What was so important that he wanted to elaborate to us? And so I want us to continue on with that thought. Now we ended, I think in the last week of January or first week of February, we ended in John chapter 6. And so I'm going to give us a quick recap. I don't normally do recaps, so I'm going to give us this really quick recap so you know where exactly we left off. In this last chapter 6, Jesus was explaining, he was teaching that he is the bread of life. That no one comes to the Father except through Jesus. Many of the followers that were following Jesus, remember he had groups of people following him everywhere he go. And as he began to teach in chapter 6, many of the people said, man, these are hard teachings. You mean to tell me that you're the only way to Christ? You mean you're to heaven? You mean you're the only way? These are hard things that you're teaching us. And then Jesus even said that no man can come to the Father except the Father allows it. And many of the believers, as they heard this, they began to think this is a hard saying. How can you say this? And many of them stopped following Jesus at this point. And then Jesus turns to the disciples and he says, do you guys want to leave me too? How discouraging would it be for you to come and to sacrifice and to do everything you could for all of these people? And you're pouring your heart and you're trying to teach them truth for them to turn away. And Jesus turns to the disciples and says, are you going to go too? And I love Peter's response. Peter says, where else would we follow? Where else would we go? Who would we follow other than you? You have the words of life. Peter recognized that what Christ was saying, the person that they were following now was different than anybody that they'd ever seen, anybody that they'd ever followed, and that his words were the only ones that mattered. So that leads us up to chapter 7. And in chapter 7, we're going to read a couple verses and we'll stop and talk. It says, verse 1, it says, after these things, Jesus walked in Galilee, for he would not walk in Jewry, because the Jews sought to kill him. So Jesus is there. He was walking through Galilee because he wouldn't go through Judea. Because in Judea, all the Jewish leaders were there. They wanted to kill Jesus. So he's walking through Galilee. Verse 2 says this, now the Jewish feast of the Tabernacles was at hand. So they're getting ready to go into this festival, or the Feast of Tabernacles. So that's what I want us to talk about first. What is this Feast of Tabernacles? Many of you may not be familiar with this idea. I wasn't too familiar with it. I knew some of the things, but I did a little bit of research over the last week to find out what exactly is this Feast of Tabernacles. And if you don't know, it's an 8-day celebration that usually takes place in September to October, depending on the lunar year, because the Jews go by the lunar calendar. So it's different each year, but September to October, and it's an 8-day feast. Celebrated to remember the 40 years that the Jews spent wandering in the desert, in the wilderness. They celebrated it, this is what I found interesting, they celebrated it by living in a tent or a booth for the entire celebration. So they remembered back to the Old Testament where they were walking through the wilderness, living in tents, constantly moving. And so what they do is for 8 days they go back to living in tents to remember where they were and where God had brought them. So that gives us the background of the feast or the celebration that the Jewish community was getting ready to celebrate. That's a very important feast. That's a very important celebration for them. I mean, for them to spend 8 days out in a tent and kind of moving out of their homes and giving up certain things, that would have to be an important celebration, right? Verse 3 and 4 says this, his brethren therefore said unto him, depart hence, and go into Judea, that the disciples also may see the works that thou doest. For there is no man that doeth anything in secret, and he himself seeketh to know openly. If you do these things, show thyself to the world. So here's what we're seeing, Jesus' brothers. When they say brethren, they literally mean his physical brothers. James, some of the other brothers, right? I forget all of them. They've got 4 brothers that we know. And so they were talking to his brothers. And Jesus' brothers came to him and said, look, this is a great time. All the Jews are coming together. They're doing this celebration. This is the perfect time for you to go make known who you are. To show your miracles. To do these things. And then look what they say in verse 4. For there is no man that doeth anything in secret. So they're comparing Jesus to a man. No man that can do all of these things does it in secret. Now let me ask you something. Why would a man that has the power to do things, why would he not do it in secret? Why would he want to do it openly? Typically, like if you and I had this awesome ability, we would have a temptation to do what? To do it, to take the glory, right? That would be a temptation for us to not do it in secret. It's a waste of time to do it in secret because nobody's going to see. I want to do it openly. And so James and the other brothers saying, why no man does things like this in secret. And he himself seeketh to be known openly. So he says a man would want to be known openly, right? It makes sense. And he says, if thou do these things, show thyself to the world. And then verse 5 says, for neither did his brethren believe in him. Even Jesus' brothers did not believe who Jesus was. And a lot of it had to do with it didn't make sense to them. Why would this man do things secretly? But I think one thing that James and the rest of the disciples and everybody in that day that weren't fully understanding is this. Jesus wasn't a normal man. He didn't come with manful human pride, trying to build up his own ego. He didn't come for self-gratification. He came to save the lost. And the way that he went to do that sometimes doesn't make human sense. You know, that same thought where the brothers came to him and said, hey, you need to do this, you need to be open, you need to share this, you need to do all these things. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Satan in the wilderness. When Jesus went to 40 days in the wilderness to be tempted by Satan, what did Satan say? Throw yourself down and God will lift you up. That'll prove who you are. Satan wanted Jesus to show himself openly right then. And Jesus said, no, it's not my time. It is not time for all these things to be revealed. But Satan was trying to tempt him. That's the exact same thing that Jesus' own brothers were trying to tempt him to do what God has called, to do the opposite of what God's called him to do. Verse 6 says this, then Jesus said unto them, my time is not yet, but your time is always ready. Now this cracks me up. Jesus basically says, look, it's not my time to do what you're telling me to do, but guess what? If you want to go proclaim me to the Jews, it's always your time. It is always a good time for you to go proclaim the gospel. Like John the Baptist, before Jesus even came on the scene, John the Baptist was preaching that Christ was going to come, right? He was preaching the Messiah. All this was happening. And Jesus looks at his brothers and says, look, if you want to go proclaim me, it is always a good time for you. There is never a bad time for you to go proclaim my name. But for right now, it is not time for me to do this. But you guys are free to go do it. To me, it almost seems like a challenge where God is saying, where Jesus is saying, look, I have some other things that I've got to do, but if you really believe in me, go proclaim my name. Continue on in verse 7, he says this, the world cannot hate you, but me it hateth because I testify of it, that the works thereof are evil. So he's saying, look, it's not my time. The world hates me because what I'm doing, what I'm saying, is revealing the evil in the world. And they hate that. We continue on in verse 8 through 10, and he says this, Go ye up to the feast. I go not up yet unto the feast, for my time is not yet full come. When he had said these words unto them, he abode still in Galilee. But when his brethren were gone up, then he went up also unto the feast, not openly, but as it were in secret. So Jesus tells them, look, it's not my time. You guys go up to the feast. You guys go do the normal feast that you guys came to do. And it's not my time yet. I'm going to stay back here. And then after they left, he followed them up. And if we think back and we think about what's going on here, it makes perfect sense. The Jews up in Judea wanted to kill Jesus, right? Where were they going to go to try and find Jesus? To his brothers, to his group of disciples, to all of the ones that they knew were following him, right? They knew who his disciples were. They knew who was following Jesus. So the first place the Jews were going to look at the feast was right where all of his disciples were. So if Jesus was there, the Jews were going to try and stop Jesus from doing what he was going to do, right? So Jesus says this, you guys go up ahead. I'm not going yet. It's not my time yet. You guys go. They go up ahead. Let's find out what happens in verse 11. Then the Jews sought him at the feast and said, where is he? Almost as if Jesus was God, right? Almost as if Jesus knew what was going to happen. The Jews come to the disciples and they look for him. Where is this Jesus? And verse 12 says this, and there was much murmuring among the people concerning him. For some said, he is a good man, and others said, nay. But he deceiveth the people. Verse 13, howbeit no man spake openly of him for fear of the Jews. So it's almost like today, just like today, where everybody has their own ideas, right? Everyone has their own opinions about certain things, but sometimes the fear of what others may say keeps us from verbalizing it, right? That's what the Jews are going through. Some Jews said that he's just a good guy and he's helping people. Other people say, no, he's evil and he's deceiving people. But no matter what your opinion was, nobody was willing to say it because the Jewish leaders were gonna have a fit about that. Verse 14, we continue on. He says this, now about the midst of the feast, Jesus went up in the temple and taught. You see, now Jesus waits about the middle of the feast. Everyone's sitting down, they're doing what they say. They couldn't find Jesus. He wasn't with the rest of the disciples. I kind of envision Jesus almost sitting back in the corner, observing, being part of the feast, but step back so nobody even realizes he's there. And then in the middle of it, he goes into the temple and he stands up and he starts to teach. That's what Jesus was waiting for. If he would have went up with the disciples, the Jews would have stopped him and he would have not had the opportunity to hit that temple and start proclaiming the word. Verse 15 says this, and the Jews marveled, saying, how knoweth this man letters, having never learned? Jesus answered them and said, my doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me. That's an amazing thought. The Jews literally thought this. This guy was never in our schools. We didn't teach him. How does he know how to speak? How does he learn? And Jesus says this, it's not my knowledge, it's not my doctrine that I'm teaching. It's not your doctrine I'm teaching. It's God's doctrine. God taught me, and now I'm taking God's doctrine and I'm putting it to you. The Jews would have been furious about this because the Jews in their schools, they taught their doctrine. They didn't want anybody teaching anything but their doctrine. They wanted to indoctrinate people with their rules and with their ideas. And Jesus came and he said, look, I didn't need your schools. I didn't need your indoctrination. God the Father gave me and told me the doctrine that I'm going to give to you. 17 says this, if any man will do this, or will do his will, he shall know, if any man shall do his will, he shall know of the doctrine, whether it be of God, or whether I speak of myself. So he's saying this, look, if you're doing God's will, if you're doing his will, the will of the Father, you're going to know what I'm teaching is true. But if you're doing your own will and your this isn't going to sound right to you. He's pointing to the fact that the Jewish leaders, the Jewish elites that were in that room, they weren't seeking after God. They weren't seeking after what God desired. They were seeking after traditions. They were seeking after religious ideology. They were seeking after comfort of continuing what they've always done. They had no desire to follow who God actually was. And Jesus says, look, if you were to follow after God and seek God, you would know if I'm teaching of myself or if I'm teaching of God. And then he says in verse 18, he that speaketh of himself seeketh his own glory. So we go back almost to the very thought at the very beginning, where he says, hey, if a man does things in secret, he doesn't. He doesn't do things in secret. He does things openly. He says this, he that speaketh of himself, he that speaketh of himself seeketh his own glory. So he's going back to the same idea of, look, I'm not seeking after my own glory. I have other things in mind. But he that seeketh his glory that sent him, the same is true, and no unrighteousness is in him. So he's going back to the idea of, look, if you're seeking after yourself for your own glory, for your own ideas, you're a false teacher. You're seeking your own glory. That's the opposite of what you want to follow. But if you're seeking after God, and after the glory of God, and trying to give glory to God, that's where you find righteousness. Verse 19 says this, did not Moses give you the law, and yet none of you keepeth the law? Why go ye about to kill me? Now, if you don't remember the full idea, I think it was John chapter 3 or 4, maybe 5. I can't remember exactly where, but the idea of Jesus doing these miracles and healing a man on the Sabbath, it happened a few times. But Jesus healed on the Sabbath, and the Jews wanted to kill Jesus because he healed on the Sabbath. And he's looking at them and saying, look, you don't even follow Moses' law, and yet you're trying to kill me because you say I didn't keep the Sabbath? And so most of the people there, the people that were not the Jewish leaders, many of them wouldn't have had any idea that the Jewish leaders were trying to kill Jesus. Most of this is happening behind closed doors. If you remember through all of the other Gospels, numerous times, time and time again, the Jewish leaders said, we've got to say things to try and trap him because the people are for him. The people like him. And so the Jewish leaders right here, Jesus is pointing out to them and saying, look, you're trying to kill me for not obeying Moses' law, but you don't obey Moses' law. And then verse 20 says this, the people answered and said, thou hast a devil who goeth about to kill thee. So he's saying, look, you have a devil. No one's going about to kill you. Who's trying to kill you? You have a devil. Jesus gets to the heart of the issue of their hypocrisy, and the Jews accuse him of being demon-possessed. Instead of them facing the fact of actually dealing with what their issue is. You know, a lot of times, and I'm about to get really honest with you about my life, a lot of times we get this idea of following God, who God is, of drawing close to God, and a lot of times the religious normalities, the religious traditions make us feel like we're following God. They make us think, oh, because I'm doing this and this and this, I'm following God. The traditions have nothing to do with following God. The law that Moses set forth had nothing to do with following God. It showed us our sin. That's all it did. We're going to talk more about that in just a second. It says, Jesus answered and said unto them, I have done one work, and ye marvel. Not you marvel as if it's a great thing. You marvel as if I can't believe you would do that. Jesus did one thing. He healed somebody on a Sabbath. And they attacked him. He said, you marvel, you attack me, you go after me because I did one thing. He says, Moses therefore gave unto you circumcision, not because it is of Moses, but of the fathers. Sorry, hold on, I think I skipped a little bit. No, Moses therefore gave unto you circumcision, not because it is of Moses, but of the fathers. And ye on the Sabbath day circumcise a man. If a man on the Sabbath day receive circumcision, that the law of Moses should not be broken. And ye angry at me, you get angry at me, because I have made a man every whit whole on the Sabbath day. Think about this idea. What is circumcision? I'm not going to get into gross details, but what is circumcision? It cuts a part off of a man, right? It removes something from a man. It makes a man not whole anymore, right? And he's pointing to the Jews and he says, you will even go to make a man not whole, to remove something from a man on the Sabbath day just to keep this law. And yet I come on the Sabbath day and try to make a man whole. Now which one is better? Removing something and making a man not whole, or healing somebody and making a man whole? He's showing them their hypocrisy. He says, look, I have not come to do my own will. I've not come to boast myself. I've come to help you people. I've come to do good things. I've come to heal. I've come to save that which is lost. You guys come to destroy. You're like snakes. You come to destroy and to hurt. And you'll break the law for your own tradition. But you won't give grace to the helpless because of tradition. You see where I'm getting at? Many times our tradition removes the grace that we should have on people. Our tradition removes the compassion that we should have for people. Sometimes our tradition gets in the way of us serving God instead of helping us serve God. I'm not saying traditions are bad, but I am saying this. Our traditions should never get in the way of us doing what God's called us to do. Verse 24 says this: judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. So what is that idea? I mean, just contemplate that statement right there. I'm going to read it again. Contemplate this thought. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Jesus was telling the religious leaders this. This was a command to them. This is a command to us as well. Contemplate what that means in your mind. What is Jesus saying to you? Judge not according to appearance. How many times do we see somebody doing something and not have the full story, not fully understand what's going on, and we attack them, right? I know in the States, many times as we were growing up, if somebody went home on a Sunday afternoon and cut their grass, man, the church would crucify him. And he would say, well, I work 6 days a week and I don't have any other time, right? We would crucify that man. Folks, that is not righteous judgment. That's the opposite. We're not showing compassion and love. You know, I struggle with this the most out of my entire life has been patience, has been compassion, has been gentleness. This last week has been no exception. This last week for me has been exceptionally hard. I remember even last 2 nights, laying and praying, God, there's this portion of my life that I hate, and I want it gone. I'm just being honest with you. Can you identify portions of your life that you just disdain? It gets in the way so much, and you want it gone. You don't want to deal with this anymore. You don't want other people to struggle with what you're struggling with. You don't want other people to become hindered or hurt by the things that you're struggling with. there's these things in my life that I struggle with, and I just want it gone. Have you ever been like that? I think this is what Jesus is telling them. He's trying to show them an area in their life where their tradition is removing grace. He's trying to show them, hey, this is an area in your life that you need to get rid of. And we see in the coming chapters that we find out they don't get rid of this area. They allow it to fester and to get worse. I know for a fact I'll never be perfect. Paul talks about how he struggled this way and that way, and he always had these consistent struggles. And I feel like this is my consistent struggle that I consistently struggle with, and I ask you to pray with me on it. I prayed over the last week especially. I've been reading the scriptures and hoping that God would really help me with this. And it's one of those areas, but I want to ask you something. As we read through this passage, are there areas that God is saying, this is something in your life that needs to be changed? This is an area that's keeping you from being able to be as effective as you could be. If there is, are you willing to go to God and say, Lord, I don't know how you're going to remove this. I don't know how you're going to change this. But I know you can. And I know you want me to live righteously. You want me to judge righteously. You don't want me to judge off of appearance. You want me to do things rightly. Are you willing to go to God and say, Lord, whatever it takes, take this struggle that I have, this part of me, and change it. Make it different. I'm giving myself to you to make me different. I don't want to be the same. I want to be different. Do you guys have that desire? Are you open to God changing you? To God doing something great, to making you new? Or are you like the Jewish leaders, just comfortable? This is the way we've always done it. This is the way I've always been. This is just my personality. That's a common phrase. This is just who I am. I've always been this way. This is my personality. This is because of how I grew up, or whatever the case may be. Whatever your excuse is, this is just who I am. No, that may be who you are now, but that is not who God wants you to be. God wants to change you. I would ask you to do what God is trying to get the religious leaders 2,000 years ago. Do what He's trying to get them to do. Say, Lord, this is an area in my life that I need change. Would you help me change? Would you help me be new? Would you help me be effective for you? Let's close with prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this passage. The encouragement it was to me this week. Even though this is a very hard week, so much going on, so many emotions, so much unexplained things going on, things I don't even understand in my head. Yet you know it all. You understand it all. You have a purpose for it all. And you desire to grow us, grow me through it all. As you would be with us this week, that we would reflect in our lives, reflect on all the areas of our lives, who we are, what we do, the areas we go, the conversations we have, the attitudes we have, the actions we have. And I ask that you would give us the desire, give us the willingness to submit ourselves to you, for you to change who we are to who you want us to be. We ask this in your name. Amen.